What we've actually got for you this afternoon is we've got 3 case studies where that has actually been done. I'm just going to do a brief intro for everyone, just so you know who they are, and then they'll introduce themselves a little bit more as each case study comes up. First of all, I'm Matt Brewer. Just get that out of the way. You don't need to know any more about me. That's fine. We also have Pinder Dillon. She's going to be doing the first session. She's from EE, and they've actually brought their content design and development back in-house, and they've actually created their own design team within their company as well to do that. So she'll be talking about how that's worked. We also have up here as well, we have Rob and Ailey from Royal Bank of Scotland. Done the same thing, brought the content development back in-house, created and are developing constantly, I think, their own team as well to improve their own skills to be able to do that more and more. And obviously with RBS, fairly large user base of about 73,000, I think that's about right. So yeah, how that's worked for them as well. And over at the end here, we have Anthony and Kerry. Basically run a lot of pubs and restaurants. Possibly have found yourself in them many times, or could just be me, I'm not sure. And again, they're going to explain how bringing content development in-house has increased their learner engagement greatly. But also, I think with the case studies, it's always important to find out how they've done it, what's worked, and also perhaps what hasn't worked and what they've tried from there on. Okay? Quick bit of housekeeping, you know about the toilets, sorry about that. No fire alarms planned either, but there's no water to put it out even if there was one. So what we'll do is we'll now pass you over to Dylan. Sorry, to Dylan, that's your surname. to Pinder. I thought I was going to call you Panda, like you said earlier. And what we'll do is we'll run through each presentation about 15 minutes, and we'll do questions for everyone at the end, if that's okay. So I'll pass you over now.
Thank you, Matt. Okay, so there's a reason why I'm part of a back office team and not a presenting team. So I'll try and be concise in my presentation today. So please bear with me. So I head up a training design team, and the team and I are responsible for 18,000 learners internally, and anything up to 25,000 with our partners, designing content from induction, mandatory, management development, products and services, and everything in between. For a CEO and a group of MDs who are really passionate about learning for their people and demand the very best in design and delivery, it really is a high agenda point for our organisation to ensure that we're really agile in what we can do so that we can offer the very best service. We know it's incredibly important to have really engaged internal staff, because without that, you can't have customer engagement. So with that in mind, we were in a position where we had a very healthy budget, and those of you that are going to work with agencies or are working with agencies to bring in content, I'm on about the high-end content because that's what our organisation wanted, you'll be familiar with these kind of costs. And you start to look at them, as a team, we knew that this wasn't sustainable long term. And it's great when you go and work with an agency, be that just for design or you're buying in a program of learning, but those costs can escalate, and they escalate really fast. And sometimes you end up with content that just isn't fit for purpose, or the shelf life for that particular content or that particular piece of program, comes to an end really abruptly. And as a team, we wanted to be a value add. We wanted to make sure that the content that we created could be sustainable with the costs, because we all know, working in L&D, design and delivery, you're seen as an external cost, and therefore you've got to look at where can you add value. So just to give you some context, I inherited a team where 90% of our work was conducted externally. We were using external suppliers, bringing in amazing content, and using design agencies, again, high-end agencies. with a really small team. We knew this was around 2016. We did a huge amount of research, externally and internally, and we asked our learners, how are you learning right now? Because we can see the engagement within our learning platform was quite low. And they started to say, we want more bite size. We want it to be relevant. We want you to cut through all the context that you constantly give us and tell us the bit that we need to know, because the complexity of our roles, are getting more and more. We want it to be more social, more collaborative. I want to learn of other people. So we set up conferences, and we invited our learners to share how they wanted to learn, what they wanted to learn, and we gave them examples of different formats of learning to really gauge their response rates. And on the back of that, as a team, we asked ourselves, that's what our learners want. What do we want to offer them? What do we as a team want to give our learners? Number one's really clear, that we wanted to deliver learning in the format, in the style, and in the pace that they wanted it in, and then wow them further. We wanted to stabilise our spend, because as I said, we know when the times are good, the investment's there, but sometimes you're seen as that cost kind of, extractor rather than the value add. We were working with some amazing agencies that were producing some brilliant work, but it wasn't sustainable, as I've said. So we wanted to complement. We didn't want them to lead the programs. We wanted to lead the programs to make them bespoke for our people, but still look for the external piece. So the stage one for me, was to identify the strengths that we had within the current learning and development team. Something that normally gets missed. People are in positions and people assume they're the positions they wanted to be in, and they don't have the extra skills. They're in training, they might not want to do design. They're in admin, they might not want to do something else. So I benchmarked each member of the team and looked at their current skill set. And we had quite a few different teams, we're quite fragmented. We had a digital team that looked after digital learning. We had an instructional team that produced classroom material. And we had a few people that dabbled in learning, light, design light, we called them. So we brought them all together. And when we say print, that could be digital print online. So that's layout, design, look and feel. And we had gaps. We were really strong in some areas, over-indexing, and we weren't quite there with the others. So it could be easy to say, it's not worth the hassle. This is not worth it. We're quite good. We've got a budget. We don't need to change anything. In fact, the CEO loves what we're doing. But we're not much of an L&D team if we can't invest in our own people, if we can't grow them. And that was something that was in the back of our mind. How do we grow our own so they're really passionate and want to do more for our learners? So we invested in our people. We started with our people. And we looked at, if we were going to have this design agency, what are those extra skills and where can we take people from? So we widened the net out to our learning and development team, so trainers, designers, instructional, and we looked at their skill set and their passion to wanting to create content in-house. So we started to move people around and looked then at what are all the different offerings that we can start to do in-house. That yes, we could do some graphics because actually we've got some tools, we've got some know-how. Animation was a key thing for us, and we were quite lucky that we met individuals within our pool of people that actually had a passion about doing this, but they were doing it outside of work. Yeah, we weren't actually tapping into their skill set at all. In fact, we ignored it because we were reliant on external agencies. So we had all these people saying, I could do that, and I could do it better. So the investment started with our people. And then we started to look at most agencies that you work with have some kind of production line because they can design at pace. And that's what organizations need. If you want to be an agile organization, you can't say it's going to take 6 months to produce an induction program. They want it off the shelf, they want it done bespoke, and they want it out. So in order for us to compete with the external suppliers that our business was used to working with, we had to make sure that we had an equivalent production line. So we brought the team together and we broke up that production line. And governance and planning, stage 1, was the most important. For those of you that are in L&D, and I used to get emails saying, can you just produce this piece of work for me? We'd like this bit of learning. Or I spoke to Sus and Touch, and I told them I wanted that learning, and your designer said it was okay, you had something. We had requests coming from all sorts of directions with no clarity, and then some business partner would say, but I gave you that request a couple of months ago. Why haven't you done it? So we needed governance. Like any organisation working with an agency, you wouldn't expect the learner to ring the agency and say, hey, there's a gap in my skill set. Could you produce some learning for me? So that's where we started. What was our governance? What was our front door? And we built a very simple tool. We called it our design request. And we asked a couple of questions from our stakeholders on what their objectives were, what were they looking to achieve, what kind of ideas did they have, and then we brought that into our team. That design request went over to an instructional and media designer, and they would work together to formulate a storyboard, which then very quickly goes back to the stakeholder, say, are we on the right tracks? Does it hit the learning objective? Is this what you're looking for? So right up front, you're getting a really clear metric if you've hit the mark or not. And then, this is the clever bit, we divide up that project and it gets split out amongst designers, graphic designer, a video person, an instructional designer, and they work on multiple projects, but parts of projects, and then the governance team bring it back together, and then it gets stitched, and then we move it across. So at any given time, a set of designers could be working across different projects, which gives us more viewpoints. Yeah? So you're not stuck with the same design again and again. And it probably happens where a stakeholder says, you know what you designed for me last time? I want that, but a little bit different. And then you fall into that trap of just regurgitating the same things. Once you start to split out your work and pick the right people from your team, the right skills, with the right expertise, you can build at pace. And we increase the pace. And we increase the output and the quality. That people internally were saying to me, what's the name of the agency that you're now using? It's incredible. They're producing faster, better. They hit the mark. It looks like it's our material. And it was us. And the last bit in that production line is the governance again, and we put it, if it's digital, it goes out digitally, and we built an academy, and I'll talk you through how we did that. So we started right at the beginning, doing really simple stuff, complementing what agencies were doing. Kind of interactive guides, yeah, really basic stuff, but actually putting a layer of, small bits of design and pushing that out there. So rather than a PowerPoint going out, the learner could self-direct, and there's a spine, and they could cut through and say, actually, that's the bit I want. We could embed some little videos. And it was very basic, yeah? So it kind of let us dabble in design and get feedback from our learners before we moved away from the high-end agencies. And then we started to look at learning like programs of marketing, campaigns. And if we were going to deliver classroom training, we wanted to make sure that our trainers weren't forgotten. Now, we have cut down the amount of classroom training that we do, and we have switched over to digital. But our classroom training is our platinum training. When somebody invests and come into a classroom session, they want the best. So we wanted to set up our trainers, not 7-hour training sessions where people just can't absorb that material. But we looked at training material and said from the start, what should that training guide look like? How do we make the guides up, that session, its component parts? That the trainer should have agility with their delegates to say, what material do I need to cover in this session based on the people that I have in that room? There shouldn't be any printing. It's all done on a tablet. They can skip forward. They can interact with the team. They can give them the handouts. When we're updating, we can do an automatic update, so no training is out of date. We push it out live through a central depository. And then we started to move a little bit further. Just move from there. And we started to create more animation, where we could take complex subject matters and we could start to break them down into bite-sized learning, chunks of learning, and deliver on the back of programs 2 minutes, 3-minute learning, 4-minute learning, so people could come back, and it was a series of learning. So we started with some very simple animation, hand drawings that we animated. Tools are available. Really complicated subjects that really engaged the learner, rather than the learner saying, I don't get this. They could learn at their pace. They could rewind the video again and again and again. They could have supplementary material. They could read it if they wanted to as well. There's a transcript with all our animation. We moved into After Effects because the internal team were getting really passionate about the feedback that they were getting from their learners to say, they want more of this, so I'm going to learn more, without me having to tell them that they needed to learn more to deliver more. It becomes self-fulfilling. People designing material for learners and learners appreciating that material, and then the designers, upping their game. Becomes organic. So within 15 months, we switched the model. We invested in our right people with the people that we had. We didn't bring in new people. Yeah? We moved from 90% external to 90% internal. And we flex that 10% when there's content that we feel that we cannot create in-house, or the urgency is there, or the expertise is there, but the shelf life is too small for us to invest in-house. And it complements us brilliantly. Now, my team and many designers will say, and I was saying to the business, you want more and more, and we're upping the game more and more. But if you want the Mona Lisa, I can't do it with, I need the tools to do it. I knew I wasn't going to get any more funding. So for every penny we didn't spend with an external agency, we banked it. And we banked that money, and then we invested in our equipment and our soft skills. And we did it slowly. For every £100 we banked, we got to the amount that we needed to buy one MacBook, we did. That MacBook was shared. We saw the value in creating more content, then we bought another one. We used phones for, cameras. Then we invested a little bit more. For every penny we saved with an external, and it was easier for us to show that saving because we were using externals. And then software. We were subscribing to 30 days free for a subscription, seeing if it would work. Would it add value? Yeah? Then another designer would use it for another 30 days. And then we would discuss, actually, by having that software, it's allowed us to produce X within this time. It's added value. We've got the feedback. We've moved the mark. We've moved the dial. So we invested. But in the center, we constantly invested in our people. We gave them permission to push the dial. We gave them permission that it's okay if that video doesn't work. Yeah, because you've tried a new treatment. It's okay, but at least you've tried it and you've learned, because that's what we wanted them to do, learn and move on. And then there were two game changers. So last year, as we had started to develop our people, and we'd pushed the design, and pushed it as far as we could, but we still needed to shave time off. We're an agile organisation, products and services launch all the time. We needed to make sure our people were ready in the moment. Something launched, not too soon, that learning, because they'd forget it, not too late after the product launched, but in time and bite size. And we came across, and they're here today, is Gomo, an authoring tool. And this really changed things up for us. So now I could use instructional designers who wrote brilliant copy, but weren't digital designers, but could now understand an authoring tool, because the hard work of the authoring tool had been done. It's a real game changer. Now, I've seen Gomo used brilliantly, but equally, I've seen it used really badly. So if you don't invest in your people to give them those skills and just rely on an authoring tool, you won't get the impact. You've got to do both. And once we had our mobile responsive content that was rich, bite-sized, that people were chomping at the bit to get more of, a series of content, our average online time went to 14 minutes unprompted. Our mix of how people absorbed content went from around 89% desktop, we flipped to 53% absorbed through a tablet. And then we reduced our shrinkage costs. So we, as a design team, training team, we had to pay for the privilege of somebody coming to learn, to come off the phones, to come off the shop floor. Well, that started to change because people were dipping into learning when they wanted to, when they could, and they were keeping on track. And one of the other game changers was our platform. We introduced a new platform with growth engineering. They're not here today, but have a look at them, because they really understood from where we were coming from that we wanted engagement, and that had to be at the heart of it. So for every module we launch, we give it a badge. For every badge, there's an award. And then there's a social wall. And then we use the methodology of gamification and put that into our learning. So we have battles and quests. So people are learning and hanging out in a learning platform after, they've done what we want them to do. So for us, mandatory training, compulsory training gets them onto the platform. What keeps them there is the engaging content. And they stay on average, 14 minutes after they've done what we've asked them to do. Within 15 months, we've hit 1 million full completions of digital e-learns. And we only class a full completion if the e-learn was set for 5 minutes and the learner is set for 5 minutes longer, we take that recording. If they've click, and it's 1 minute, we don't class it as a complete. Yeah, because we all know we can fudge numbers. So we take a true reading, of our people and the engagement. So you've got to invest in those things. And there's huge amounts of pros, the time saving, you don't have to brief the agency, you understand your learners that much more, you can really bespoke the language, you have more flexibility in keeping that content up to date. There's no such thing as out-of-date content, there's no such thing, because you can do it at pace. The budgets that you save, that you can invest into your people, and when your people feel invested, they do more, we know that. And you get very clear return of investment. It's very clear, black and white to see. And that's a game changer. When you're sat with the board asking for more funding, it's very easy to get because you can show it. That's it. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you, Pinder. We just need to swap the presentations over now. And next, well, as I say, we'll do questions for everyone at the end. Next we have Robin Ailey from Royal Bank of Scotland. I'm just going to come over and I'm just covering whilst we get that sorted out over here.
Thank you. Okay, and then you were the one. Stop right there. Yeah, I was just looking at. And it's there you go. You're not on yet. Okay, that's ready to go. Okay. I'm okay? Can you hear me great? I'm not going to lie, I'm a little bit nervous. Okay. So, hi, I'm Ailey, or Ailey, or whatever you want to call me, but it's a nice Scottish name, and I head up the digital team in RBS, and this is Rob. He works on the team as one of our consultants, and we're going to talk to you today about a journey we've been on for 3 years now. It's been a long one and a really hard-fought journey, but hopefully you'll get some tips and inspiration from what we talk about today. So, we're going to tell you a little bit about some of the ways in which we helped save £3 million for our organisation by moving our e-learning development from an outsourced model to an in-source model. So, kind of focus on some big numbers here, which we're massively proud of. So how am I measuring that £3 million? Well, we were pretty much a completely outsourced model. So we know, based on the volume of content we have built for the organisation, which is now above 350 bits of learning, that's roughly what we would have spent externally had we gone to the marketplace to source somebody to give us that content. We have just over 70,000 employees in the organisation now, but they're consuming our learning at around 2.3 million hits of that content. So we are a bank, we are in a regulated environment, so it's a bit unfair sometimes to use a measure like that because we make them do some of this stuff. But I think what we've started to experience is a real change in appetite for consuming that learning as we've changed the quality of that. And we have a really high completion rate on our regulatory content, so they're consuming that at above 95%. So it's been a 3-year journey, and it's been pretty hard fought. So before I started the role, we had a 5% in-house model. So anybody in the bank who wanted a bit of learning would just pick up the phone to their favourite supplier and say, oh, can I have this please? And this is what I want it to look like, and they'd just, knock a product up for them. When we started the team, we would just get a call, a bit like Pinda's point before, I just want this and I want it now. And when we started the team, we were like, oh, okay then, we'll deliver that for you. And I think part of that was trying to build a bit of a reputation for the team that we'd created to be able to deliver this stuff in-house, and start to drive some of that business away from those external suppliers. I started the team with 10 people. I recruited that team from internally within the organisation, but I deliberately went out for quite a mix of individuals, so people with an L&D background, people with potentially a marketing background, so that we could start in a position where we felt we had a broad range of skills. So that's where we were, and our quality was pretty variable. I think we're pretty ashamed of some of the stuff we put out in the early days compared to where we are now. But I think it's really important when you start on a journey like this that you're not going to be as great as perhaps your competitors if you're starting to build that from ground up. So where are we now? Well, we do 95% of what the bank consumes in digital learning. The other 5, Pin's made the point before, if we need an expertise or a skill, or we're doing something that we don't have that capability to do, we're not going to make ourselves try to do that. We'll go and source that from the right supplier at the right time. We've really turned the tide on how our stakeholders in the business view us. We're much more trusted partners and advisors in helping them deliver their learning needs rather than them ringing us telling us what they think they want. I've grown by 2 people. Woo, the team has grown. But what we've built, and I'll talk about this in a minute, is the development and investment in those people has been absolutely critical to how we've turned from where we were 3 years ago to where we are now. And our learners love what we do. So our LMS does have a rating system and the ability for our learners to tell us what they think. They're not shy in coming forward when they think it's not that great. So we're pretty proud of the increase in sort of engagement we've had through that content. So 2 things, Rob and I will give you a little bit of a focus on what we've done with our people and how we've moved our content from that variable stuff that we didn't quite like at the beginning to where we are now. So Pinta mentioned something before in her presentation actually around how the team is set up. When we started this team, I actually made a decision to set the team up to run the end-to-end process. So they start the piece of work and they follow that piece of work from understanding the need. They'll do the instructional design, they'll then manage that project, they'll then build it, they'll storyboard it, they'll prototype it, they'll test it, they'll launch it, and then they'll evaluate it. So they are responsible for the whole entirety of that project. So I guess what that led me to have to develop in everybody was 4 sort of key skill sets. So I've kind of bucketed them and they're pretty broad, but learning and development being their understanding of what good, effective learning is. So them knowing what good instructional design was, what a learning need was, and how to understand how to put that into a piece of content. Stakeholder management, so we're such a broad organisation. One day they might be talking to a pretty senior stakeholder about a policy, or it could be the next day they're in a chat with an SME who's doing something off the side of their desk. So the stakeholder range is really broad. Project management, they probably on average run 4 or 5 pieces of work at any one time. So they have to manage their own kind of end-to-end through all of those bits of work. So it's really key that they're able to do that. And then design and technical, this is the software that we use to build the learning. This is the Creative Cloud, the Animate, the Illustrator, whatever piece of software we're using at that particular time. So it's a pretty broad range of skills that I'm asking one person to hold quite a lot of knowledge in. So how did we do that? Well, we We take time out constantly. So the beginning of the year, we've already done it for this year. We have our complete schedule of our development days already planned in. So we are out every couple of months for a minimum of 2 days where we focus on a range of learning activities. So it could be that we get a creative session running, we do some challenges. We have a real ethos and culture of sharing skills. So I have some in the team who have greater experience than others, and they help drive up that knowledge across the team. But we're also starting to build expertise and some real strength and depth in things like video production, animation, that kind of thing. And then I mentioned it before, we're not afraid to get the people in to tell us how to do it better than we think we can. So I'm going to pan to Rob just really quickly. He's going to talk you through a little bit about our process that we've created in terms of improving our content. Sorry, Rob. Thanks.
Afternoon, everyone. So, sorry to talk to you about process at this time of day. It might sound a bit boring, but this is really important into how we work as a team, both internally but also with our stakeholders. So I'll just fire up the process now. Probably nothing radical here, but the important thing was that we designed it as a team and we all signed up to work in this process. So just to walk through some of the steps, consultant review is potentially one of the most important because that's an opportunity for us to push back. If there isn't a need for digital learning, then that's the time for us to sort of question it and really get into the depth of what it is they actually want to achieve with the learning outcome. We've then got a series of steps around prototyping, alpha build and review, and beta build and review. And these again are iterative steps that we work through with the stakeholder, so they're fully involved in that. They give us feedback on those stages. And we also peer review as a team. So that's important to get sort of feedback from your peers. Then we go into the gold version of the test. So we have a functional test team that sits alongside us. They basically try and break our content, make sure it works for our learners. We go live, and then we're into evaluate, which again is a really important step. We do that 2 ways at the moment. So we do MPS, so that's obviously in the moment, and we also do post-implementation reviews, and that's typically sort of 3 to 6 months down the track, and that's about really understanding has the learning landed, what are the results that we're seeing from this out in the business. Now, process is one thing, but it's only as good as the thing that you put through the process. And we realised we needed to do something else to tidy that up. So I'm just going to pass back to Ailey now to talk about our blueprint.
Thanks, Rob. So I said at the second slide, I think that we were order takers. We would just do what we were asked to deliver. We probably didn't have the confidence to challenge some of what we were being asked to design and build. And as a team, we felt we needed maybe just some extra tools in our armoury to somehow challenge the thinking of these stakeholders who predominantly have got nothing to do with learning. They're a policyholder, they just sit out there and they think they know what we should be teaching people. So might seem really simple, but this has been amazingly powerful for us and the team in those sort of initial conversations. We call it our blueprint because we like to give things a fancy name, but it's based on 4 really sort of short things: focused, clear, simple, engaging content. So what do I really mean by that? Well, focused is about making sure that we tell the learner what they really need to know and not the other 55 bits of the policy that you think they need to know. So we've invested really heavily in trying to make sure that whatever we produce is absolutely focused on what that employee has to do at the end of that piece of learning. And when we might put something out to 70,000 people to spend another 5 minutes on something that they didn't need to know, that's a lot of man hours out of our organisation. So that has been really critical. By clear, this is just a nod to our core like L&D principles. We can't build a better learning if it's not got an objective, and if we're not really clear about what we expect the learner to do at the end of that. Are we changing knowledge? Are we changing behaviour? And do we need to assess what we're doing? So we're very clear about that. Is it simple? So as a financial organisation, we love an acronym. And God, we would fill our learning full of words and letters that meant absolutely nothing to most of the average Joes who were actually being asked to do it. So we keep it simple, we keep it very logical, and we stop duplication. So that's been really key. And then engaging, this is a bit about how we're actually designing that learning. So are we making it interactive? Are we using animation? Are we using this? So this is where we're putting our design skills into practice and making sure that we are raising the quality of that learning. So it seems really kind of straightforward, but this has been such a powerful tool for us when we've been sitting down with our sort of broad range of stakeholders. So we wanted to show you very briefly, we could have brought 350 bits of learning to show you where we've been, but we just took a few shots of a few things, and Rob will just kind of very quickly talk you through where we've come from to where we are now.
Yeah, so just to provide a little bit of context, you've all probably seen sort of content that looks like this. This is where we were in 2015, so very sort of almost PowerPoint based, really simple UI, very repetitive as well as courses go. Soon gets very boring for the learner, and we needed to move away from that, so we used our principles, and I've just added in a few examples here, and I'll just quickly talk through what they are. So this is about investment fraud, a course basically about fraud, and the idea here was that the learner would listen to a series of recordings, then make decisions based on what they hear from the fraudster. As you can see, we've sort of refined the look and feel a bit from 2015, started to finesse the interface, use grid systems, and try and move a bit away from the stock photography. Next example, so this is some of the illustration we've done in-house. So this was a course on health and safety, and where typically in 2015 we may have just listed the hazards in the workplace. This is about the user trying to find them and making it more interactive. We're really trying to make them sort of experience the learning rather than just be told what sort of happens. Another quick example, this is a menu. So this was about using the blueprint and being really focused on what we want people to learn. So people had already sat this content last year, but they were going to resit it. So there's a pre-assessment up front, which then allowed them to jump around the game board. If they passed the pre-assessment, they could only then sit the new content, obviously saving time. Multiplying that up, obviously is a big saving for us as an organisation. And finally, this is just a social media quiz, so trying to bring in some gamification principles into our work. Could have been a really boring sort of 5-question assessment. Instead, we sort of built a custom UI in Storyline, pulled through the learner's name from the LMS, just to personalise it. And then there was also a scoring system at the end that just tracked how well you'd done as a learner. So there are just a few examples of the sort of thing we're doing at the moment. So I'll just pass back to Ailey now to wrap up.
Thanks. I don't need that. I need that. Thank you. So I guess this is a kind of point in time for us. We've been on a massive journey, but I think we probably feel like we're probably just beginning. So we are starting to think about our investment in technology. What can we do to keep ourselves moving, keep our team developing? We're starting to do a lot more video and a lot more animation. And that's going to come with it probably more team members, more skill sets that we need to build. But I think it's really clear for us that there's a lot still to do, but we're in the best place that we can be right now. There's a lot of investment coming in terms of some of our platforms, because they do restrict some of what we can do just now. But we are in a place where we have a big journey ahead of us. So I think the key is to make sure we evolve with that, to keep at pace with what's going on in the external marketplace, but also to keep at pace with what our organisation needs us to deliver in terms of learning. So I think that's it from us.
Okay, yeah, thanks to Rob and Ailey there. And our final case study is Mitchells and Butlers, and we have Kerry and Anthony here who are going to run us through their one. We'll just get the presentation switched over.
This one right here, Anthony Williams, right?
That's the one.
stand in the way.
Okay, good afternoon. You'll be pleased to know it's getting ever closer to beer o'clock, and it will come very obvious why we care about that fairly shortly. So I'm Anthony.
And I'm Kerry.
And we work for an organisation called Mitchells and Butlers. Who's heard of Mitchells and Butlers? This is we're getting better at our umbrella marketing. If you haven't heard of Mitchells and Butlers, you may well be more familiar with some of these brands. Yeah, a few more nods. That's good. Got some Harvester fans in. Yeah, good. Okay. So I guess we need to start with our stories, really. So up until 2 years ago, my role was as a face-to-face trainer, having done that for around about 15 years. And now my role has changed somewhat substantially. And pretty much all of the stuff that we're talking about that we now do, a year ago, I was sat there going, I wish we were doing that. So I guess the takeaway is you don't need to have years of experience in doing this stuff. You can turn this around really, really quickly. And I think, Kerry, you would even more so.
Yeah, absolutely. So conversely, I've only been working in learning development just shy of 18 months. So the model that we're going to show you today is the only model of L&D that I know. So again, it's kind of back to that point that the skills that I've learned in the past, probably 12 months actually, since we've accelerated this, I've learned very quickly with the use of sophisticated yet quite simple tools. So hopefully that gives you the confidence that you'll be able to do it as well.
Okay. So working in L&D and hospitality has some challenges. So we have a lot of people working for us. They're based across a multitude of brands in loads of different locations. Very few of our people actually have a work supplied device. Most of them won't touch a computer during work at all whatsoever. And for many people in our industry, learning will never be their primary focus because this isn't ultimately where they see themselves. Often people join our industry for a short period of time, or often intend to join for a short period of time, he says, about 20 years after he had a part-time job. Okay, so it's quite a challenge really for us. And that was really where this journey began, was how do we conquer some of these issues?
So if we rewind to a year ago, so when I was just getting my teeth into the role, most of our learning was face-to-face. It was very much administered centrally, so we would say where people needed to be for their training, what time, very set locations. We did have some digital learning, but that was entirely outsourced. So, we really kind of had the challenge of what outsourced content can bring. So it is costly. It's very time consuming. It's very difficult. And when I mean difficult, it's costly to update when you do need to update it. So there were some real challenges that we faced. What we also found was that there seemed to be a bit of a disconnect between the business and what the business needed versus what potentially our content developers thought was great learning as well. We think you need an interaction here, or normally after this many screens, we'd put a quiz in. So there was a bit of a varied kind of almost definition of what we saw as being good learning as well. So we really wanted to take back control of what that looked like for us.
And when designers are left alone to come up with stuff and go, it's been a while since we asked a quiz question, we better throw one in, this is the kind of quiz question we get. As you can imagine, not really aligned with our business needs. And it felt to us like the designers were adding stuff to make what was perhaps not particularly fun to start with. We'll add in some fun stuff and that'll make the whole thing fun, right? Wrong. Bit like, take a Brussels sprout, dip it in chocolate. Makes it fun, right? No, still sprouts. That's the problem. And this really came to a head, as I say, about a year ago. I was working very closely with our L&D admin team who take all our support queries, and they passed one on to me. And they said, Anthony, we've got a learner who's got a bit of a problem. And I said, sure, is it a technical issue? I'm sure I can help them with it. And they said, yeah, absolutely. You know that screen where you have to drag the rat droppings to the word rat? It's not working. And my response was, you're damn right it's not working, but it's not a technical issue. So if there is one thing that we've learned, and I would hope you take away from today, is whatever you do with your content, please, please, please drop the droppings. Get rid of that stuff that somebody thought would make it interactive. It doesn't necessarily add to the value of what you're trying to do, and in those cases it was very much detracting from the value that we were getting from our learning. So, bit of a light bulb moment, Kerry.
Yeah, so we wanted to update our content, bring it in-house, take back control of the type of learning we were pushing out there. And we wanted to change it from, in terms of a learner mindset of, oh, e-learning is that thing I have to do every 3 months for compliance, I need to tick a box, to actually, do you know what, digital learning is really, really useful for me to do my job properly. It's that, we've heard it all day, you know, just-in-time learning, but also just for me, and actually just enough learning as well. I think sometimes when you outsource and there's a 6-month kind of lead time, you want to chuck all the content you can and the kitchen sink, because actually in 6 months' time there's going to be another need. So why not just put it all there, shoehorn it all in? So we really, really wanted to break that down and as I say, just make it useful for our learners more than anything.
Absolutely. So, we had to do something different, so we went back to the drawing board and we came up with what we think is a better recipe for success. And again, I'm going into process even later than you, Rob, so I'm pushing the envelope of process here, but our process is a little simpler, I think. Our process has 4 steps, and it all starts with starting with the end in mind, making sure we really understand what is it that we're trying to do. So we consult with 2 key audiences here. We consult with the subject matter expert to find out what is the problem you're trying to solve. And we don't accept things like people need to be more aware of. No, show me what the problem is. So the next question that is, where is the data that proves this is a problem, please? And then, what would that data look like when we fixed the problem? At that point, we then go out to our end users and say, do you understand this problem? Is this a real problem? Is this something you are experiencing? What do you think might help you to solve that problem? And do you know what people don't tell you very often is what's going to solve the problem for them? A 45-minute e-learning course that means I have to sit and do something other than the job that I'm trying to make better. So once we've understand the problem, that's when we really start to kick in and start to think about, okay, what could we provide that would help this?
Yep, so stage 2, obviously we're going alone, we're doing it ourselves, we're going to have to create some assets here. So we've kind of thought, actually, do you know what, you don't always need to create, you can curate as well. So if we skip back to creation, so a lot of our content is video-based. So we did need to invest up front on some kit. So yes, we got a nice camera and, oh yes, we got a nice tripod to put it on. But actually, the most important part of this kit is fantastic audio devices. So having good audio equipment is so key to a great video. And actually, do you know what? You don't even need that fancy camera. We just wanted to get one. You can do it with that thing in your pocket. So phones are absolutely fab to creating some good video content. Just make sure you've got that audio equipment, because that is really key. Then you'll probably need to invest in some software, you know, if you are going to be doing some editing. So again, we've got packages that we use, but also think about actually what's already at your disposal. So have you ever tried creating an infographic in PowerPoint, for example? They can do just as good a job. So then if we go on to the curation. So again, we have a curation tool. So Anders Pink, they pull the most relevant news articles, journals, whatever it may be on the given topic that you tell it you want some information on. But actually, do you know what? You can curate from probably the world's best learning and development tool, which is YouTube. So just make sure it's someone that you trust and that you'd want to share with kind of a wider population. Again, you don't always need to start from scratch when you start a new project. So for us, we always have a bank of stock images or stock footage that could work for lots of different modules. So for us, it's a nice shot of someone pouring a pint or somebody walking through a pub that we can overlay with text or with somebody speaking over it. So think cleverly about how you kind of bank up a bit of a library of resources you can use again and again.
Absolutely. Now, you'll hear over the next 2 days about the ever-changing skill set of L&D. Well, great news if you want to create your own content, here's a whole load more for you. However, as we said, we didn't have these skills a year ago. Arguably, we don't have them now. But ultimately, all you really need is a desire to learn, because the world's greatest tutors are already out there and they're already sharing that content with you. So if you want to go out there, I sometimes say what I've learned to do in the last year, I was self-taught, but that's not really true, actually. I was taught by some of the best experts that are out there, because they've got YouTube channels that show you how to create great footage, that show you how to author things, that show you how to edit things in a really great way. And pretty quickly, you got skills. So, we've consulted, we understand the problem, and we understand the audience we're building this content for. We've created some resources that will hopefully help to tackle this problem and start to put it right. It's at that stage when we start to think about packaging. So a lot of the stuff we build, we just release the resources to people these days. We tend to collect it together. We use Totara LMS, so it may be that course page just has a collection of resources that help. Fantastic, great, nice and easy. Sometimes, however, we need to go a little bit further than that, and we need to build a bit of a narrative. We need to build a storyboard. So that was why it was important for us to have, again, an authoring tool that would really help us to do that. So it needed to do a few things. First of all, we knew from the outset it needed to be cloud-based. And the reason for that is we're all distributed all over the country, and we have corporate laptops, and it's really hard to get software installed on them, so let's not do that. Once we'd found that, we wanted a package that would work really simply with the kind of resources that we use. So can it publish text, video, audio, all of those kind of regular web-style content really quickly and easily? How long would it take us to train somebody to be able to use this? And from our results, it's days, if that. We needed something that would also output in a format that would work for our learners. So at the moment, about 30 to 40% of our content is consumed on smartphone, about 10% on tablet, the rest comes in desktop. So it needed to be absolutely fully responsive, HTML5, and we needed to be able to be confident that we would know how it would display on any device that people were using. So once we'd selected that, it kind of all comes together at that stage. And of course, we can start to produce a wide variety of content.
Absolutely. So that was a really, really quick kind of demo of a course that we could put together. Now, in our business, we sometimes have real business needs to get content out quickly. And you saw us just build a page in 20 seconds. So, you know, it makes you really, really agile as a business to be able to say, right, something's happened, we need to get some content out to our people. So here's just a bit of a variety of resources that we push out there, and we use the word resources rather than courses. So what's quite interesting about this screen here is the video content to the right, we actually had nothing to do with. So we were able to upskill our kitchen team with some of the skills they needed to do video editing, and they had a go themselves, and they put these training videos together in, again, a couple of weeks. So it really goes to show that just once you invest that time in upskilling yourselves and maybe the wider team, just how quickly you can put some of these resources together.
Absolutely. Yeah, so just to put that in context, we had a kind of a near-miss incident just before Christmas with a guest with an allergy situation. We were given the brief and started filming on the Monday morning and had the product out approved by Thursday night. Now that every second that we're not showing that video to people and we're not showing that content is another second where that accident could actually happen. So it's really important that we can get things out as quickly as possible and then move on from there, which kind of leads into the last stage of the process for us, really.
Yeah, so as you can see here, actually, once you've got to the launch, test and learn part, you do start again, you know. So again, with outsourcing, you're always looking for that perfect finished product. You know, you're paying for this and you're going to wait until it's absolutely 100% correct, which could mean weeks or it could actually mean months. So when you do it yourselves, you do have that flexibility to update it whenever you want to. Something that we've adopted is this kind of motion of let's push 80% of the content out there as soon as they need it. You know, let's give learners the content they absolutely need now, and let's let them tell us what else they need. You know, that 20%, actually, they might tell us, well, we want a little bit more of this, or actually, I've just filmed a video in my pub. Can I put that in the course? So we ask people for their content as well to make up to that 100%. And then again, get back to the consultation. So we never really have a finished article because there's always content that needs updating. So we always have, kind of the end of a project, a bit of a review with our stakeholders, but then we also have a date in to have a look at it again and make sure that it is absolutely relevant.
Absolutely. And of course, the beauty of defining the problem at the start is when you get back to that point, often you've solved that problem, but you've uncovered something else now. So we can start that process again. But what we're not doing is waiting until we've figured out all of the things that could be wrong before we start doing something. So, build it and they'll come, I think someone once said. I think it was Kevin Costner. Sadly, not true. One of the big learnings we've had is that more and more we're finding that the work we do is much closer to the work that marketing and comms do than it ever was with HR. Now, we do still sit in the HR function. However, on a daily basis, we probably spend more time thinking like a marketeer than we do thinking like an HR professional. And there are 6 key indicators of us of how are we going to make this successful. The first thing is absolutely be customer focused. If I was working in a pub 4 hours a week, would I want to spend one of those hours sat in front of a computer? I don't think so. If I've got a problem, can someone solve it for me quickly and easily? And can I use the device I have in my pocket to access that resource now? So we think about our end user. We also think about what does it feel like to be that person and why might they therefore be motivated to look at this content. So we think about the emotional side of things. So that allergens course that I mentioned that we produced just before Christmas started with our safety manager listing the names of the people that had eaten out in the last 12 months and didn't come home because their allergen was not dealt with correctly. That's quite powerful. So this isn't you do this because we tell you it's something you have to do. This is, you do this because it has an impact and you can understand what that would feel like. So that really gets people thinking about this in a different way.
Absolutely. And number 3 on there is have a communication strategy. So quite often, we might have worked away on content previously and communication and how we're going to get it out there is always an afterthought. So we've kind of put that right at the start of our process again now. So who are your audience? What communication channels do they use? What tone of voice is appropriate for them? Another thing that we found really useful is we have engaged our internal comms team to really help kind of drive some of these messages. And we also have kind of an overview of what business activity is going on at any one time. So we can really tie our content into what's happening out there in our business. So an example might be appraisals are coming up. Well, great, let's do a bit of a comms strategy, a comms piece on pushing out our appraisal content. Or actually, Miller and Carter have got a wine and steak deal. Brilliant, let's get some wine knowledge out there just before that kicks in. So really make it relevant to your organisation at any one time. Number 4, so what sets you apart from your competitors? So actually, our competitor as L&D is people's time. What's going to make people stop doing the day job and actually invest some time in their learning? So it has to be quick and easy to access. And when they get there, it has to be useful and not frustrating with lots of drag and drops.
Absolutely. Now, we hope most of our content, the incentive is, I'm going to solve a problem that I had. That's always what we've started out with, is how do we help you solve a problem that's stopping you being able to perform the best you can. However, we do all live in a world of compliance and mandatory training, so it's not always the learner's choice to want to go to this content. So that's where we use some fairly rudimentary gamification techniques. So we built into our platform a score system. And that's a fairly holistic score, so it's not just for course completions. We also reward people for engaging with the platform. We have social aspects to it as well, so liking, sharing, commenting on things also attracts a score. We provide badges for what we consider to be courses or achievements that may have some external kudos. So it might be something that you would want to share wider than just within our organisation. And we use a ranking system so that people can be quite proud of where they are and where they sit in the learning hierarchy, which doesn't always match with their organisational hierarchy and gives them something to really be proud of. So finally, it's about, as part of our test and learn process, identifying who are going to be our ambassadors, who are going to be the ones that will promote this with their colleagues, whether that's directly in their business or through social media. We always try and find people who really get what we're trying to say. And then wherever possible, We'll talk to those people, we'll get some testimony, and then we'll build that into the content, because it's far more powerful to hear from somebody who's, I had this problem, I used this content, it solved my problem, you might want to look at it too, is much more powerful than us saying, hey, here's something that we want you to do.
So we're lucky enough to have been able to start collecting some data on what people think about this new style of content that we're putting out there. In our previous model, it was around 37-38% of our learners would have promoted it, so they would have said that they would have recommended it to a colleague as being useful. We're now up to the 73% mark, so we know it's working. We know that our users are engaging with it and that they're finding it useful and they're enjoying it. But actually, we've got some more powerful stats in terms of performance data, which Anthony will share as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So we said it is all about solving business problems that people are facing every day. So just to pick 3 examples of projects we've worked on in the last year. So we moved all of our menu training into digital resources. So previously, we would have taken chefs out of their work time, taken them to our development kitchen, showed them through the new menu, and then they would go back and then cascade that knowledge back to their teams. And what typically happened was when we changed the menu, we would see that for the first month or 2, our guests would perceive that the quality had dropped. And that's simply because they're getting used to the new menu. There might be new ingredients, there might be new cooking methods. When we switched to digital resources, because these are now on tap, these are available for people to look at as and when they need them, we saw immediately increases in food quality as perceived by our guests. So actually, people were able to provide the new menu better than the one they were used to. We also moved our safety refresher training. We do quarterly safety refresher training, things like fire safety, food safety, licensing law. We moved that from, again, cascade model that managers would deliver face-to-face in their businesses. We moved that onto our digital resources and saw an immediate reduction of £600,000 off the annual budget. That's just based on labour. When you've got a company the size of ours with 46,000 people, if we're asking the business to get everybody to spend an hour in learning, that's £250,000 we've got to find. So it wasn't difficult to make that cost saving. But perhaps one that we're most proud of is we were asked to help with coffee sales in our business. So we had a mini relaunch, we did a little bit of internal marketing, but the big piece of new content was helping people to understand how to produce and sell great coffee in our business. Now we set ourselves what we thought at the time was a really, really super ambitious target of £500,000 increase over a year. We hit $1 million after about 7 months. That's fairly significant. And again, it was all in-house content, it's all resources. And it's resources that people can turn to as and when they need it. This isn't a 45-minute, 100 slides where the bit you want is right in the middle. This is, show me how to make a latte. Here's a video on how to make a latte. Okay.
Brilliant. Okay, so what to take away? Taking the top spot is drop the droppings. Drop the frustrating interactions that's going to take people time, especially if you're in a cost-saving, time-saving organisation. You are going to need to build your digital skills, so make sure you invest time. We work in L&D, we like to learn, so I probably don't need to tell you that you need to do that. Make sure you have that kind of process of continual improvement. So, once you finish that course or that group of resources, don't just sit back and move on to the next one. Make sure you've got that plan to keep kind of updating and improving what you've already made. And then think like a marketeer. So, yes, you might spend all this time building some beautiful content, but actually really think about what's going to motivate and drive people to go and complete it.
That's it. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, folks.
Great. I think for me, I'm going to be going back and starting to go through this entire process myself now. So thank you very much for doing that. We do have just a few minutes for some questions. If anyone's got a couple of questions that we could, hand straight up there.
Hi, we have an internal design team. One thing we struggle with is reviewing resources to keep them current, particularly when you start to build quite a large catalogue.
Yeah.
What's your process? This is to kind of everyone. What's your process for that review and making sure that things stay fresh and current?
Okay, so the way we do it is in the initial scoping meeting, we then set up when we'll the regular reviews happen. We try and do it quarterly, if possible. And the other thing that we do to try and make that easy on ourselves is to create as many small resources that serve one need as possible. So if something needs changing, it's only one resource, it's not an entire piece of content that you've got to now find the bit, and we can swap things in and out fairly easily. So that's how we do it.
Yeah. So we do something very similar. Everything that is produced is logged. We put a review date in there depending on what that product or service or program is. We timeline it, somebody gets allocated, so it always gets picked up. We use a hosting tool so we can make live amends rather than taking an e-learn down and then pushing it back out. All our training material, again, is online, so everything is updated and pushed out, and I think that's the key.
We're a little bit different in that quite a lot of our catalogue sits in the regulatory mandatory space, so is driven by a cycle of requirements to make sure that is accurate against a policy or something along those lines. But where it's sitting in the more softer skills space, we make sure that we review that content regularly with our key stakeholder out in the business, because we don't own that content, they do, so we make sure we have a process that involves them.
Okay. Ooh, another question over there.
Thank you for sharing your experiences. I guess maybe it was just in the third case, but the question of user-generated content.
Mm-hmm.
So you guys took back your content into your L&D function.
Yeah.
I'm facing a large project where I'd like to enable, a large percentage of my subject matter experts to produce great stuff themselves. So in this case, if you have any specific experiences on that point, because you want to have quality and guarantee some pedagogy in what the guys are doing, but enable the scaling and putting that content production really in the hands of the experts themselves.
Yeah.
If you have any insight or experience on that, would be useful.
Yeah, so we do have experience with that. So one of our recent courses was all about pre-shift briefs. So managers should spend time with their teams discussing what's about to happen. So the way we tackled that is we just went out and filmed one. And it wasn't necessarily perfect, it was real. It was a case. And the challenge was, we'll put this on our LMS. If you send us a better one, we'll use yours. And then we continue to have that. So it's a bit of a challenge, it's an ongoing challenge. And what we find is we probably will never get the perfect one, but that's good because that means someone can go, well, I can do better than that. But each one has some learning in it, and they can also see everybody else's. So that's how we do it for that one. And we're also very conscious that content we create, particularly video content that we create, whilst it should be great learning content, what we don't do is over-index on the production values, so we don't spend a fortune on getting an amazing crew in to do it, because if we want people to create their own footage, they're going to be benchmarking against the stuff they've seen. So that's why for us, clear audio is above all else the most important thing. The rest you can kind of work with, and if it's really that bad but the learning content's great, we'll go and help them reshoot it. So that's how we would do it.
Yeah. So we've had a similar campaign at EE where we have, again, huge amount of frontline staff that are real extroverts and love to be on camera and love to share content, and they were doing it on WhatsApp groups, so we formalised that and encouraged them to do it on the LMS and do real sharing. But what we found was that they wanted help just initially with, actually, how do I produce a good video with learning content, because people can get really embarrassed about sharing that knowledge if they know thousands of people are going to see it rather than just the people in their store. So we pushed out some really nice little e-learns on, actually, if you're going to use your handset to do a video, think about this, think about the audio, think about the light, have a really clear outcome that you want to share. And that in itself, that campaign generated a huge, it kick-started our peer-to-peer learning, which is what we call our golden learning. To learn from your peers, we feel is one of the best things you can do. So it's setting up your audience to be able to share. Otherwise, we found that they're really reluctant to share.
Yeah.
Just to add, I think we're in a slightly different place. I think it might be a bit of a risk if we were to hand over the sort of power of the authoring to our SMEs, because we very much need to challenge this content that they give us, and if we didn't, the module or the content could run on into a couple of hours, but it's our job to try and really trim it down and challenge them and ask them, what really needs to be in here, what does the the learner actually need to do as a result of completing this piece of learning.
And we don't have a platform that enables us to put user-generated content up, so we are really impinged by that. But 2019, woo, it's coming.
It does, the platform
It's
makes
the
such a big
tools in the
difference.
platform.
Yeah, it makes a big difference because you're allowed to share content. You can see the content streams. You can have some, governance around it if you
Checks and
want to.
balances in,
Yeah, you can
absolutely.
balance it out, and it just speeds things up.
Okay. We've got one more quick question because I'm just aware of it.
Hello, you've mentioned collaborative learning. So how did you kickstart that other than just doing the videos? What platforms are you using and what are you encouraging them to use?
So at EE, we work with growth engineering for our learning platform. It's an out-of-the-box platform. We had a huge campaign. So we had an LMS before. We swapped out to a new one, which was mobile responsive. It is gamified. And we started a huge campaign around, you're in control of your learning. So it's called Learning Redesigned. We handed out a huge amount of incentives to log on. We gave videos out. We engaged with our comms teams. So it was a real campaign from start to finish that we were going to do something different. We wrapped it around a key learning program, which was digital skills. We wanted everybody in the organisation to take part in the same learning to get momentum going so they could share ideas rather than fragmented learning that was just about the area that you're in. So we found that we got everybody together. We did a big T&A on what digital skills they needed, and then we produced the content on the back of that T&A. And so therefore we listened to what our people wanted, and then we gave them the material, and we built it in levels. So there were 10 levels to the program, and as they did bits of learning, the next level would open up, and it was all bite-sized. So it was a couple of minutes here, 5 minutes there, 2 minutes there. It wasn't all video, it was a combination, but it was the program end-to-end and the comms that kick-started it for us.
Okay, well, I'd just like to say thank you to our team that we've had up here. To me, that's been a brilliant session because I'm in a similar position, but starting from where you were, I think, a little while ago. I hope it's been really useful to all of you as well. I'd also like to say thank you for sticking with us today as well.